Carilyn, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been looking forward to this all week.
Yeah, I really appreciate this for the audience. You and I just met, I don't know, 2-3 weeks ago via Twitter. And I think you are not, I know you're the first person that I think I've talked to and made a connection like this. And so I really appreciate you and your time being a part of the podcast. Something that stood out to me, and I want to just kind of dive into this. There's a lot that we can talk about for the show. You have a tweet that is pinned where January 1st, 2022, you have a project of where you're going to try to walk 6,240 miles in this year. How did that all get started? Walk us through, how did you get to this goal for 2022?
Well, so it's a little convoluted, but short story is when I was running professionally, I would average 120 miles a week, sometimes more if I was, ramping up for something, sometimes less than that if I was doing, recovering or something. And then I'm obviously not professional anymore. And so I just kind of kept that general number in my head because it's an easy, just 20 a day, morning, afternoon, kind of keeps my day bookended, that sort of thing. Then my mother fell ill and I started being one of her caretakers. And suddenly my world kind of shrunk. I don't know if you've ever, when you have children, my children are gone now, but when, suddenly I was back in that mode of being responsible for somebody. Yeah. So I had tried to race during that period, but almost every single time there'd be a phone call that there was an emergency, or leading up to the event, there was always problems, like we were in the hospital weeks, that kind of thing. Yeah. So my life just kind of got where I really couldn't set a goal and go to it, which is our normal paradigm for racing. If we're competitive runners, that's what we do. We build up to a race, we recover. And I just couldn't do it. I've left, I can't tell you how many races mid-race or signed up and then couldn't start because of the situation. So at the beginning of this year, after COVID, after everything, I just thought I need something that I can control myself, regardless of my situation. I need a goal that it makes no difference whether there's an outcome that satisfies anyone else or that gives me any, like there's no medal, there's nothing, there's no prize. I just needed it for myself. Yeah. So I took my 120, that was kind of my standard, and extrapolated out 52 weeks and came up with 6,240. So, and with it, and in that pinned tweet, it says, I can front load or back load because I still have obligations and things to do. And sadly, shortly after I set that goal in February, my mom passed away kind of unexpectedly. She had been ill, so not really, but I didn't think it was going to be 6 months into the project. So, it's really helped me in a secondary way that I had not anticipated. With the goal being structure, originally, it also ended up being a fantastic tool for grief that I did not know up front. And I didn't know how much I was grieving ahead of time, and I didn't know how much it would help me in the process. Making yourself get out and run or walk 20 miles a day forces you to kind of, keep going. And I spend a lot of time, no music, no podcasts. I do those things, but I do try and really spend a lot of time every day, really just being grateful for being alive, being grateful for my mother, being grateful for my family, and so it had a second benefit and a second outcome of really helping me with grief. Yeah. So I've just kept going, and I'm, plan to finish it up, even though I'm signed up for races again. I just thought this is something that has been really good for me, and I didn't anticipate that.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate you sharing that, and I'm sorry to hear about your mom. Loss is always tough, and everyone has their own grief. Yes. And so I appreciate you being vulnerable with that. You've mentioned that you used to run competitively. Take us back. When did you first, fall in love with running. When did that first begin? Was it when you were younger? Was it in high school or college? Walk us through that journey that has gotten you to this point.
Well, so embarrassingly, I hated running when I was young. I was a competitive swimmer, and was on a travel team, and trained even very young, 6 hours a day, 3 in the morning, 3 in the afternoon. Just spent a lot of time in the pool. So running was actually the antithesis of swimming. Swimming, you're lightweight, feel free, get on the run. And I just felt like so I hated running. But at about 14 or 15,
Yeah.
I had when you're that serious, that young, there's a lot of, that age is tough. In retrospect, I feel bad for my coach, because I'm sure I was a pill, but my coach and I got in a fight, and I just did what a 14, 15-year-old girl would do. I just quit. I just walked off the pool deck and never went back. But having started swimming competitively at 5, I was very used to just really structured training. So I started running just as a way to kind of bridge the gap, and joined the cross country team, ran some in college, that kind of thing. And I stuck with it mostly because running is just a lot less work than swimming. Getting to a pool, just everything involved with swimming is a lot harder, whereas walking out my front door is much easier. So that is how I ended up transitioning to running. But no, I did not start out with a love of running at all.
So you left or quit with swimming, and then you started running. I ran cross country too. I had
Did you?
looking back, I was not the fastest. My junior year in high school, I started running cross country. I used to run the 800 meters in track, which now is like
That's a
sprint.
hard event.
It really is.
Wow,
And
such a
it's
hard event.
yeah, it's unbelievable. I watched some of these clips on Instagram, where students are running like 45 seconds for a 400-meter run. So they're just sprints now. But the cross country for me really helped me. I think enjoy running. I still like to run. I don't do it as much, but I've gotten back into it. I had some knee pain, so now I'm doing a lot better with that. But yeah, those 3 miles back in the day, that was like beast mode. Just kind of thinking about, okay, can I get through the 3 miles?
Yes.
And I can still remember there were people like freshmen running sub 15-minute 3 miles. And I never got that close. Like I couldn't get below 18. I got my fastest was like 18:06.
That's good.
Yeah,
That's
I wish I could
good.
run
That's
that now.
solid.
Yeah, at 43, I wish I could run 18:06. I would be really happy with that. So now, when you were running cross country, was that a 2-mile race? Do you remember?
I think it was 2 mile. Honestly, I don't even remember, because I only did it for 2 years, and I was simultaneously teaching high impact aerobics on a cement floor.
Oh wow,
Which in
that's
hindsight,
not good. Yeah.
it's the 80s, whatever. So I ended up with a stress fracture in my ankle. Did not know that, and ran through it. And at a meet, cross country, there's a lot of up and down and jostling, and I went around a corner and got kind of pushed over to the side and went off on my ankle and stabbed my ankle. So that was the end of running I was in a cast for a long time, and that was the end of my running career for high school. So I think it was probably 2 miles, but honestly, I wasn't that invested. I really was just doing it for something to do.
Gotcha. So how did you then get into competitive running, ultra running, team running? When did that happen?
That didn't happen until I was in my 30s.
Okay.
And I had been practicing law, and I gave birth to twins that were very premature. And so quit. I was a prosecutor, quit prosecuting, and started working part-time for the legislature, and had the 2 babies. And I just, again, exercise is kind of my default. I deal sort of with any life stress with exercise. So again, running could be, I had a baby jogger, could put them in, I could run, just started doing that. And then it just, with anything, the more you run, the more you like to run.
Yeah.
And I just got where I was running more and more. And when they started school, I joined a running group.
Yeah.
and started running some marathons. But, at that point, I was old enough to know I was never going to be like really fast. But from all the years of swimming and everything else, I had a lot of endurance. So I thought, let me see if I can run a 50 miler. Let's just see how that goes. It had that, that is, you go and it's fun. And then I went the national championship 24-hour race was in Texas. It was in Grapevine. It's called Ultra
Yeah.
Season.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I had wanted to try 100-miler. I'd done 250s, wanted to try 100, but had no interest in being out in the middle of a forest somewhere.
Yeah.
When I'd never done it before, because I had no idea. I figured I was going to die. So I thought, well, I'll at least die on a loop where they can get to me.
Die around a lot of other people, right?
Exactly. It was a 1 mile loop. I thought I'll be okay. So I did that. That was my third ultra. I did that, and it was great.
Yeah.
So, and I saw these people making the US team, and I thought, okay, I'm coming back next year and I'm going to try and make this team.
Yeah.
And that's how it started. I had no intention. It just, things happen. You just walk into a situation, and it was serendipitous, and it worked out for me. And it was really fun.
So there's a lot of thoughts that I have right now. So one thing that really stood out to me is, you started the ultra running in your 30s. And I think that's something really great for those who are listening, that, you don't have to be, you don't have to have this thought that, well, I'm not in my 20s anymore. I'm not a teenager and I can't go out and do this. So I've heard so many other stories like that. I don't know if you know Rich Roll. He's got a podcast, and I know he does a lot of ultra running. And who was one of the original guys? I read his book years ago. And
Dean Karnazes.
Dean, that's right. I remember him, and I think in his book, he had talked about when he left. I think he may have been like at a bar or something like that, or had some fight with his wife. And one night he just went running. It kind of sounded like Forrest Gump, right? And just like he ran 30 miles or something like that. Yeah. So I love that, because it's a great reminder for all of us that no matter where we are, we can start doing something, and we can make some really big changes. Now, you talked about 250-mile races. The first time you got into this, so two questions here. Were you still running then in your 20s? And then when you first started the ultra running, was the first thing you did, was it a marathon or was it the 50-mile race?
So I was not really running in my 20s. I was exercising. And I mean, once in a while, like, I was in law school. So once in a while, I'd like, between classes, I'd go, I was at Texas Tech and I'd go run. There was a loop. I would go run the loop periodically. But I mean, I wasn't running. That would be a huge stretch to call that running. It was just moving a little bit, and my big concern at that point was to not be fat. It had very little to do with mental health or anything else. I just didn't want to be fat. So whatever I could do, a lot of Diet Coke and some exercise is what it amounted to.
Gotcha.
And then I always walked, regardless of anything else I did, I always walked. So I was outside moving. It was important. But no, I didn't really pick up running until my mid 30s. And I made that team. I turned 40 in October and I made the team in November. So I made the US. I didn't really become competitive until I was 40. So, I mean, I think that's the beauty of running and ultra running, especially. Like, it really suits those of us who start late. So.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think there's something there where there's always time to get started for a lot of people. And I really appreciate you sharing how exercise is such a great stress reliever. People, I used to follow Bill Phillips, who wrote the book Body for Life. And I got a chance to speak at one of his camps 4 or 5 years ago. But one of the things he would often talk about, and other people have too, I'm sure, is just how exercise, it's a great antidepressant.
Yes.
And, it's something that I just think a lot of people are not tapping into as much. And the fact that you're getting started in your 30s or 40, and then just going down this path, it's just really phenomenal. So, when you did that, was there any hesitation? Like, did you complete those first 2 50-mile runs? And then, what happened in Irving, and how long were you on the team when you began all of that?
So I did complete the 250s. One was on trail and one was technically trail, but it was loop trail, like a 5-mile loop. So the first one was on the PCT, the Pacific Crest Trail, and it was up to Timberline Lodge and back. and it was super fun, but I was terrible. I mean, like embarrassingly bad, because I don't run. I live in the Rocky Mountain, the base of the Rocky Mountains, the Franklin Mountains. It's very, very rocky. So unless you have people to go with, you can't really train there by yourself. And there's not a lot of running involved. It's a lot of more like hiking because it's bouldery. So I was, when I did PCT, that my first one, I mean, it was like, I really thought, okay, I'm never doing this again, because like, it's kind of like me with singing. I know I can't do it. So I had
Yeah,
that,
yeah,
I
me
don't think
too.
I'm going to do this,
Yeah,
but I just enjoyed it. So I thought, okay, I'll do one that is on loops. It was still trail, but it was loops. And that one was really fun.
yeah,
And I thought, okay, maybe if I just try something flat, since I'm training flat, it'll be better. So I
yeah.
did those 250s, and that's why, when I saw Grapevine, it was, I did the second one in like May, and Grapevine was in November,
Okay.
ultracentric. So it wasn't flat, but it was asphalt relatively flat, because it was the
Yeah.
national championships for the 24-hour team. So it wasn't, it wasn't trail, or, there wasn't a lot of climbing or anything.
Yeah.
And it was just that moment of like, oh, I can do this if I do it on this surface in this type of environment.
Yeah.
And I'm super, kind of my personality is I'm really, I keep lists and charts, and
Yeah.
and the loop thing just works in my brain.
Yeah.
You know,
Gotcha.
no
Yeah.
more
No. Yeah.
swearing.
No. Yeah. That's all good. So, what's the furthest you've run then? I know the 24-hour race, that was with other people then, correct? Like a relay?
Yeah, no. It's one person,
That
and
was
I did.
one person. Okay.
Yeah.
So, how far was that?
So my first time I did it was 127. I've done
Wow.
131. But there are women, let me just tell you, women now at this point doing like 150 something. So it wasn't, at the time it was good, but it's not good. I mean, it's good, but
Yeah. That's
I'm
huge.
just trying to say there are women who are a lot better than me at this
Yeah.
point.
Well, no, I mean, look, 120 miles, 127 miles in 24 hours. So, did you have a team then? Did you have your family or some other people helping you, whether it's like driving with you or food or clothing? How did that work?
So the way it works is it's a 1 mile loop, and everyone crews around the perimeter. They set up
Okay.
tables or whatever. And ironically, we were next to Dean Karnazes. That's why it was so funny.
Really?
His dad was crewing for him, and he was next to my husband, and my 2 kids were there.
Yeah.
And you just go around a 1 mile loop for 24 hours, and you go as far as you can. And so,
Wow.
and
So,
that's and then they they take the top 3, and there's a US national team, just
okay.
like with any sport. And then they take top 3 automatic, and then they expanded it to 6, where it's 6 automatic.
Hmm.
So we always had 6 people on the team, and I was on the team 4 times over a period of 10 years. So from 40 to 50, I was on the team 4 times.
Okay. So, I want to talk about mindset then, because if you can run 120 plus miles in 24 hours, there's something, you're mentally strong. I know people talk about hitting the wall in a marathon, like at mile 18 or mile 20. Um, Walk us through the mental games, if you were playing games with your mind, or the stories you were telling yourself. When did you feel like, okay, I think I'm just ready to go home? And how did you push through? Because I think there's something here that can translate to other people too, where a lot of times people have a hard time figuring out how far they can actually go. And I think many people can go way further, much further than we ever thought, whether it's with nutrition, whether it's with endurance, or even just when things are bad in general. So give us some insight with that mentality that you had. What was that why? Or, how were you able to push through those walls?
Well, I don't know how deep you want to go with this, and
Please go deep.
okay.
Take your time.
All right. So when I was 10, we had a horrible tragedy happen in our house, and I was the only one home, and I was the one that discovered it. And I ended up with horrible PTSD. They didn't know that's what it was at the time, because this was, a long time ago.
Yeah.
Ended up in, mental health care, and It took me a long time to kind of recover from that. And they didn't really know what to do. Like I said, I was only 10, and it was just a really hard kind of recovery period. But one of the things that my parents forced me to keep doing was to keep swimming. And every couple of weeks we had to do what was called a 2-hour swim, and it was a nonstop 2-hour swim in a 25-yard pool. And let me just tell you, if you have PTSD, that is excruciating. And they would not let me get out of the pool. My coach was, instructed to keep me in the pool, and I just basically had to learn some techniques, kind of going through it. It's like with any sort of, I think, mental health crisis. If you can, I think, it's like cognitive behavioral therapy. If you can sort of if the stimuli is still there and you can kind of work through it. Trust me, I had no idea this is what was happening at the time. It's just in hindsight, and with therapy as an adult, this is what I think I realized. It just really allowed me to understand that my thoughts and my emotions are not me. And I was able to basically compartmentalize them in order to finish a task. And, with endorphins and all the, dopamine and serotonin and everything that happens with physical exercise, if you can bring those levels up while keeping the stress and the anxiety at bay while you're doing it, by the time you're done, you've changed the levels. Suddenly the anxiety level's down and the positive energy level is up. And it would flip the script every time. And the longer I did that, the better I got.
Yeah.
And I was eventually able to go back to school, because I was out of school for several months. I almost developed like agoraphobia. I couldn't leave the house. So I was able to go back to school. My life I was able to go on. And I think that set me up for life, for being able to withstand things, because things happen, there's continuous things. Things will happen throughout life. And I think that having gone through that so young, it just gave me a skill set that allowed me to, like, running 24 hours nonstop is very hard, but it's the same tools. I use the same tools to do that as I do to in any situation.
Yeah. Yeah. I really appreciate you sharing that. I think there's something there too. And you talking about your thoughts and emotions, and that's not who you really are. Because I think that's those, for people who are going through something, maybe not the same scenario as you, but even just like with being consistent with exercise, people just have a hard time being consistent with exercise. And we know all of the benefits of it. And yet those thoughts and emotions, those stories can override everything else.
Yeah.
So flipping the script, kind of what you're talking about there, keeping the anxiety down, and then enjoying that. Are there any tangible thoughts or pieces of wisdom that you might give someone? Let's say someone is starting off on their health journey. Maybe they're trying to lose 20 pounds. Maybe they're getting ready for a 10K or a half marathon, and they're feeling some of that pain. What wisdom, I'll put you in the coach's seat for a moment. What wisdom would you want to share with them, or can you share with them?
I think one of the so when I was actually competing professionally, I worked with a sports psychologist, and one of the things he told me that I have used consistently throughout my adult life, and I think it was kind of, it codified what we've been talking about. He said, emotions follow actions. If you allow your emotions to dictate your actions, you will never change your emotions. And so I've just thought about that so much. It's like when my alarm goes off at 4,
Yep.
everyone thinks I'm like, yay, it's time to go run. I'm so excited. It's pitch black and freezing, but I can't wait. No, it is not like that. It doesn't matter. It's still 4 o'clock. It's still dark. I still have to go do it. And it's that thing of but I know if I continue to live by that emotions follow action, not the other way around. It doesn't matter how I feel when I wake up. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not talking about being physically ill. I'm talking about mentally.
Yes.
And it does not fail. If I do what I need to do and get up and do those things, I feel the way I want to feel. And I want to feel upbeat and positive and strong and capable and stable and happy. And
Yeah.
and grateful. And
Yes.
if I do the things I need to do, I feel those things. If I allow the, I don't want to do this, or, oh, it's going to be a hard day, or, oh, I've got so much going on, and I don't do what I need to do, that mindset, those emotions track all day long.
Yep. Absolutely.
So that's, for me, that is really the biggest thing that 100% changed my life. Like little things even that follow with that. I get up every morning and make my bed. Nobody sees it but me. My kids are gone. My husband and I live here alone. No, he doesn't care, but I make the bed because that action makes me feel a certain way every time
Yes.
I walk into my room. Does that
Yes.
make sense? Yeah.
It makes perfect sense. And what you're saying is so true. So a couple of thoughts. One, I love the idea of having a sports psychologist. I'm really a big believer in coaching. That even Tiger Woods has a coach.
Yes.
Tom Brady has a coach.
Yes.
So you think about these people who are so successful in a sports area or arena, and yet they have some kind of coach. And I think a lot of times, because I do some coaching right now, a lot of times people don't always see the value of coaching. But when I look back at my life, the last 10, 12 years, I keep seeing this pattern that, you can call it a coach or a mentor or someone, that you're getting some guidance, you're getting some recommendations from, which I really love. And emotions follow actions. I've heard that before. And it's so true. It's easy to say, but like what you're saying, it's hard to do, because when you're waking up at 4, that is pretty tough because you can hit the snooze button. So I want to talk about the 4 o'clock real quick. You mentioned 4 a.m.
Yes.
So back in 2016, I started waking up at 4 because a friend of mine wanted to work out at the gym at 5. And I said, there's no way I can get there unless I wake up like at 4. And so the first 2 or 3 weeks, I felt awful.
Yeah.
And eventually his work schedule changed, but I kept waking up at 4. And so between like 4 to 8 a.m., that was almost like a whole day for me, where I started really calling it living 2 days in one, we're waking up early. So I'm curious about some of your morning routines. I know a lot of people have talked about this. Tim Ferriss has talked about this. Jocko Willink has talked about, how he wakes up early and things like that. Give us some insight with some of your routines, making your bed. And there's a book called Make Your Bed by a Navy officer, which I'm having my son read, or he actually did read it. Give us some insights of some of your morning routines. Is 4 a.m. something typical that you do? What else are you doing?
Yes. So I've been getting up at 4 a.m. for, I don't know, forever. And it, first because of being a competitive swimmer, I had early practice. So I've just always gotten up very early. I was that kid that would go to slumber parties, and I'd have to go to bed at 8 o'clock while all the girls stayed up till midnight, because I couldn't stay up because I'd been up since 4, so it's kept me out of a lot of trouble, let me say that, which is a good thing. But no, I get up at 4. So what I do, I get up at 4 and I just roll out of bed straight onto the floor because I do morning prayers. And then I get dressed, brush my teeth, all that. And then I get back, before I make my bed, I get back into the bed and I do my, I have a journal and I do meditation in the morning. I journal and meditate.
Do you have if I can interrupt, do you have any particular journal that you're using, or is it just like a 3-ring notebook, or what?
Well, this was not intentional because I didn't know we were talking about this, but it's sitting right here. So this is what I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
I'm a big Frederick Buechner fan.
Okay. Frederick Buechner. Okay.
Yes, he's an Episcopal minister, Episcopal priest, as we call him. And this book is called The Remarkable Ordinary, and How to Stop, Look, and Listen to Life. And I've always liked his sermons. And so that's what I'm using right now, but it evolves. I mean, I call it Bible dipping, and it doesn't have to be the Bible. It can be anything. I just like any kind of, I I'll read anything that I find motivational, inspirational. It can be lay, it can be religious, it can be anything, as long as it has a good message. And I just kind of open it to a place and see what it says. And I take that, and kind of go with that and riff on it, write about it, think about it. This is also the same journal that I write down my mileage and all the things. I mean, it's just kind of my little thing. But so I do that first. I try to be done by 4:30.
Yeah.
So that I can be on the road by 4:30. And I just get as many miles as I can in before 7. And that's kind of when my day starts.
Okay.
And that's why my mileage is sort of broken up. I just have to get the miles in when I can.
Yeah.
And so, but that kind of 4:30 start is concrete, because I
Gotcha.
know that that window is mine.
Gotcha. So, are you pretty strict then with your evening routine, or do you have a shut? So last year, my son Joshua, he had a friend that stayed with us, and it was just so hard. They're both 9, like trying to shut things down. So we created what's called our shutdown routine, where you take a shower, we're gonna eat dinner, no electronics, you can read, you can talk, you can draw. What's your evening routine or shutdown routine? What does that look
I would
like?
have thrived in your house. I mean, that would work for me. Yeah. No, so I am, like I said, I'm a very kind of structured person. My family makes fun of me. But I am, dinner 6:30 always. Like we've always,
Okay.
even with from the time my kids could sit at the table, dinner's on the table at 6:30. And like if my husband had to work late, it doesn't matter. We are sitting down at 6:30 and we are eating at 6:30, and we're eating together. There are no phones, there's nothing. It's just us at the table at 6:30, and we've always done that. We still do it. If my kids are home, on vacation, it kind of makes them a little like, really, Mom, we're adults. We still do dinner at 6:30. So we do dinner.
I love it.
We're done at 7, clean up the kitchen, and then we will watch. My husband and I pick like a series, and we'll watch that. So I always post that, what we're watching, like we just finished Made for Love. It's on HBO. It's about like a Google type of thing. Just finished that. So we watch from 7 to 8, and on the dot at 8 o'clock, we turn the TV off and we go to bed, and we wake up at 4 every night. Well,
every night.
We don't do that on Saturday. Saturday is like our date night. And so we don't have a time on Saturday. That's the only night. Every other night.
Yeah. So for a lot of people, and I really like this, I like what you're doing. There's something about structure. There's something about this habit and routine. For a lot of people, though, they say, no, that just seems a little bit boring, right? Where, why not stay up a little bit later? But there is something I think really important. And it's something I think you've already kind of touched on it, but I'd love to hear more thoughts from you, in particular with discipline. So the Bible, you read the Bible, the fruit of the Spirit is self-control. That's the idea of discipline, not just things we're not doing, but also things that we are doing. And other people have talked about discipline, like Jocko and a lot of other people. To parents out there, what wisdom would you give them with their children, right? About this idea of structure and discipline. Did you have a lot of pushback with your kids when they were growing up? And today, I think that's something that's missing in a lot of homes, this idea of structure. And so whether it's a 6:30 dinner or watching the television show together, what words of wisdom would you want to share to parents who are out there who have children who may, because I think your exercise began when you were a child, and it's carried you through. And so those habits from an early age are really important. What would you like to share concerning that?
Well, I hate to ever give any kind of parenting anything, because I think parenting is the wild card. I mean, it's just, I think parenting is the hardest thing anyone will ever do, and doing it well is the greatest reward and commitment ever. So I do not think that I in any way, shape, or form have any answers about it. I can only share what I did. And maybe it'll work for someone else and maybe it won't. But just from my own experience, and this is what I did with my children, the thing with structure is, I think structure works if in in between the boundaries, there's freedom. So I'm super structured in my day to day, and I was super structured with my kids, but like with my running, I don't run the same route every single day with the same pace. I wear a watch only so I can track my mileage. I don't know what my pace is. I'm not worrying about it. The structure is the mileage. And in that, I can do whatever I want. I can go do the mountains. I can go run on the canals. I can go, I can leave town and run somewhere else. Like, I'm not frantic about, oh my gosh, this has to be done this way. And that is kind of what I always said with my kids. It's like, these are the boundaries. This is how we're operating. But inside that, do whatever you want. And I don't mean that literally. I just mean my kids, one, is a lawyer and the other is a physicist. Like, they're twins. They have completely different interests, but they were brought up in exactly the same household. They were brought up doing the exact same thing. But during all that, they could take whatever classes they want. I wasn't managing them. I never once sat down and did their homework with them. It's like, if you want to get good grades, great. If you don't, that's on you. This is your responsibility. You face the consequences at school. There was just, so does that make sense? Like, there were all these boundaries, but within that, it's on you. It's your responsibility.
Yeah. And I do like what Jocko says, discipline is freedom. Yes. Where people often will say, well, man, that seems weird, waking up at 4 and going to bed at 8. But what you've talked about, living a life where you do have this satisfaction and you feel good, 8 hours of sleep, that's what so many people are lacking. And so there is something about discipline that, when we tap into it more, we'll obviously, I think, have a better enjoyment of the things that we do have, and we'll have a lot more gratitude as well. One of the things, Carilyn, that I really like to do is I like to eat. I like food. And I've told people that my are those all cookbooks?
They're all cookbooks.
Oh, wow.
Everything, yes.
So I got to ask some questions about this, because when I see your post on Twitter, there's always some kind of dessert. And if you ever need a taste tester or something like that, I'll give you my address. I love sweets.
I do too.
So how did you get into cooking? And tell us about, I'll tell the audience. So it looks like, and you correct me if I'm wrong, you have some kind of dessert after every run. Am I right or wrong about that? And how did you get into this love affair with cooking and desserts?
I don't know if it's chicken or the egg. I don't know if, like, all of my kind of hyperactivity as a kid, like I said, I swam hours and hours and hours. And when I wasn't swimming, I was doing something else physical. Yeah. If that was spurred on by the fact that I love sweets, or if I love sweets because I was always physically active, I don't know. But I was the kid that we would go out to breakfast and everyone would get eggs and I would get French toast. Like, I hate eggs. Yes. I don't want, I don't eat that way. So in fact, again, this is just on my desk.
Yeah.
See it. There's my candy bar.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah. So I do love sweets, and I do, what I do, it kind of goes back to the structure. I do intermittent fasting. And so I don't eat all day. I don't open my window until the afternoon. And so I open my window with healthy food. I have a giant smoothie with fruits and vegetables, and then some sort of protein.
Give us some details with that, because I have a big smoothie. So I use Huel protein. That's a vegan protein. I'll put in like a couple blueberries, a cup or a little bit more of sliced strawberries, peanut butter, kale. I'll throw in some almond milk and water. What's in your smoothie?
Okay, so I used to do it all kind of, individually, but I just found, and this is not a plug because I'm not sponsored by them, but I use Daily Harvest because they come and they're a mix of fruits and veggies. And then they have a lot of ingredients that if you tried to source them yourself, it would cost an arm and a leg because you'd have to get a huge thing of it and you'd use 1 teaspoon. So there's, they have acai in it, and they have soursop, and I mean, all kinds of things that in El Paso, I'm not even sure I could get some of this stuff, but if I could, it'd probably be really expensive. So I get the daily harvest smoothies, and I add a banana to every version that I'm having because I like the extra potassium, that kind of thing from all the running. And then I add, no joke, half a blender of kale or romaine, or a green of some sort. So it's basically like the daily harvest and then all greens on top. So it fills up a 32 ounce, like a big gulp cup. I have this huge cup, and I have that every day. And that's what I open my window with. And then I have, like I said, some sort of protein. Usually I'm a big kind of nut person. Like I love almonds. I love any kind of nut. So a lot of times I'll have nuts and then maybe some cheese.
Okay.
And then after I have that, after I open my window with that, that's when I have the dessert. But I start with the healthy thing, because if I start straight with sugar after fasting all day, I would be ill.
Yeah.
And then
What's your window what's your fasting window? Is it 12-12, 16-8? What are you doing?
I do 19-5.
19-5. So how many calories are you getting in those 5 hours with trying to run, what is it, 17, 20 miles a day?
I don't know. I've never, and this is kind of the discipline thing. I set up kind of the structure, and then I don't worry about it in the middle of it. So I don't count calories. I don't do macros, nothing. The discipline is, the structure is in get the 19 hours. And then once the 19 hours are done, then I just eat whatever I want. But I will say this, other than the sweets, everything else is like, I cook it all from scratch. Like, we're not eating junk. Like, I don't eat out. I mean, we eat like in a restaurant once in a while, but I mean, like, I don't like fast food. I don't eat any of that stuff. So whatever I'm eating my window, other than the dessert you see, everything else is healthy. So, but that's just by taste. It's not because I'm trying to make myself eat that. It's just that when you only eat in a window, your body's like, I must have this healthy thing. Like it really kind of separates the wheat from the chaff. You know what I mean? It really, your body figures out very quickly, it wants these nutrients.
So is your 5 hour of eating, is it at the beginning of the day or is it at the end of the day?
It starts at 2 o'clock. I eat from 2 to 7.
2 to 7. Okay.
Yeah, because we sit down for dinner at 6:30 and I close my window at 7.
How did you pick that window? Because I know so one of the things that's worked well for me, and this goes back to my days with Bill Phillips, and it's interesting because in his book Body for Life, he talked about this years ago, like 12-hour fast. So like if you have your last meal at 7 p.m., eat at 7 a.m. And Dr. Jason Fung has a lot of resources out there. You can go to YouTube and find him. So I know there's a lot of different windows. The 12-12 has worked pretty well for me. I'm not eating all throughout those 12 hours, typically every 2 or 3 hours, but sometimes it just depends. Like the shake makes me really full first thing in the morning. How did you decide on this 19-5 split? Was it trial and error? Was it research that you found? What was that?
So, and this may be too long, and so feel free to cut any of this out that doesn't work. From all the years of running at the elite level, I became insulin resistant from every 45 minutes to an hour, sucking down a gel or eating something, because that's how we were trained to do.
Wow.
And so I became insulin resistant, not severely, but enough that it was problematic. And have you ever heard of Tim Noakes? He wrote The Lore of Running. Dr. Tim Noakes.
How do you spell his last name? Do you know?
It's Noakes. And he wrote The Lore of Running, and he's sort of the guru. He invented the gel.
Ah, okay.
Not a certain brand, but he invented he's a researcher, and he's out of South Africa, and he wrote this tome called The Lore of Running that everyone's followed forever. And he became insulin resistant. He's the one who promulgated this like every 45 minutes standard.
Yeah.
And he had to dial it back and say, I was wrong, because he became, I don't know if he became just insulin resistant or he actually became diabetic, but he like went down that path. And this is a man that ran every day for 50 years. And he dialed it back, and they actually in South Africa, they went after his medical license when he pulled back from that and said, no, people should not be eating, you cannot keep, if you follow Jason Fung, you cannot keep your insulin elevated. You've got
Yep.
to have it go down.
Yes.
And so I realized then that was what was happening. I was just keeping my insulin elevated all day long.
All the time. Yeah.
Training at such a level all the time that I was hungry all the time. So after my last team, and I knew I had kind of some time where I wasn't like competing for anybody, I took a year off and did keto just to solve the insulin resistance. And it solved it. But, for me, I don't like that kind of food that much. I mean, I'm not a big meat, fat thing. I think it's very effective for certain things. I just couldn't live on that.
Right.
But I really, really liked that steady blood sugar situation.
Yeah.
So I had, Jason Fung, who is a big kind of keto proponent, he also is a big fasting proponent. I mean, that's kind of one of his, pillars.
Yep.
So I thought, well, let me add some of his fasting in and see what happens. And it was just amazing to me that if I ramped up the fasting, I could add more carbs in and have a diet that worked better for me and my palate. And so I just slowly ramped up the fasting and added in more carbs. And I found that I finally found a window that really worked for the amount of training I did with the kind of food that I wanted to eat.
Gotcha.
And it just worked. I've been doing it, started in 2017, and, knock on wood, no injuries, no illnesses, no nothing. I mean, it's, any kind of weird little things I had are all gone. It's like I came in for as they say, it's not a diet. You come in for the weight loss. I didn't really have the weight loss issue, but I came in for the insulin resistance, but I've stayed because the health benefits for me have been off the charts.
How long did it take before you saw major changes with the insulin resistance and other health benefits?
So I started seeing results probably 6 weeks in.
Okay.
But let me say this, I did try to race, and it was a disaster because I was really not fat adapted at that point. I was my body was so used to running on glycogen that I could not burn fat to save my life. So it was a disaster. It was too early for me to try to race. It really took me about 6 months to get really fat adapted. And then once I was fat adapted, so I had suffered from like eczema my whole life. When I was insulin resistant, even though I was racing at that high level, I had high blood pressure. I had a little bit of an arrhythmia.
Yeah.
I mean, I had weird little things. I had a weird thyroid problem that wasn't Hashimoto's, but it was a weird thyroid thing. I had this borderline test for lupus that came out that I was borderline possibly working towards lupus, like weird stuff. Cause I would have to get these huge physicals every year at like UCLA or Scripps or Mayo. So they did all the stuff. And I had all these weird, for how intensely I trained. Yeah. I had weird little markers, and nothing that anyone was like, okay, we're going to do something invasive for this. But it was like, this is problematic. Yeah. And I never put it together, and nobody at that point was putting insulin resistance with those weird things, or they were, but they weren't doing it for someone who was thin and an athlete. So when I did do that, keto, then transitioned to fasting, stuff that I had no idea was related completely went away within like a year. And so I just got back from Mayo. I did the full week-long physical with everything, and all of my stuff is a million times better now than it was when I was a professional athlete. Yeah, that is amazing. I love it. So now I'm really curious. I got two questions. Okay. First, can you share with us the test? Is there some particular blood test you're taking at Mayo? I want to get this blood test done here. Is there any test that you can share? Is it just some kind of comprehensive, or is it something unique to Mayo? It's comprehensive, but it's like, I would say they test for everything. Okay. And so they're just little markers that you can have that, like I said, none of mine were in the zone of, like, they didn't put me on thyroid meds because it wasn't enough. It wasn't high enough that it was like, okay, it was, like, well, this isn't normal, but we're not going to put you on medication yet. And like my blood pressure, it wasn't high, but it was high enough that they're like, you know, for as fit as you are, this should not be, you shouldn't even be high. And like
Right.
once I started the fasting, my blood pressure dropped to like 106 over, you know, 68 or I mean, it dropped 30 points.
Yeah.
So just little things like that. And the blood, I mean, my thyroid's normal, my heart, I've had every echo, every EKG, every heart
Fantastic.
thing.
Yeah.
No, you know, all of that normalized.
Wow, that's amazing. So my second question is with respect to supplements.
Mhm.
So long distance running, there's a company out there called I Can, and they have some kind of starch that they use for the carb that
Oh,
keep
you
the.
can.
You
You
can.
can.
I'm sorry, that's it. You can. Yeah, you can.
Yes.
And I want to hopefully get them on the show one day too, where their products are really good. So with running, um, sometimes people will grab a Gatorade after a 30-minute workout. That's probably not the best idea when you look at the calorie content and the sugar content. So are you using like electrolytes? As you don't use any electrolytes. What are you using for supplementation? Just
Nothing.
water to
I take
water and bananas and things like that?
plain water, plain black coffee.
Okay.
And I take vitamin D
Yep.
just because I'm a woman of a certain age. So I take vitamin D and I take a probiotic.
Okay.
When I take my smoothie, I add a probiotic. That's it. That's all I take.
Wow. Because
No
there's so many products out there, electrolyte products in particular. I sweat a ton.
Yeah, I do too. That's what
Yeah, so that's something I've often thought about, and sometimes it makes it a little bit easier, to consume that much water. Do you try to keep track of how much water you're consuming, or
I
is it just
don't.
kind of going off of instinct?
It's going off. I just drink to thirst. If it's particular, I live in El Paso, so if it's particularly hot, and I
Yeah,
the other thing I do is that I really try not, and this is more again kind of an age thing where I'm starting to get a lot of spots and stuff. So I try not to be out in the sun in the middle of the day. Whereas I used to run all day, every day, out in the sun with a visor and glasses and hope that nothing happened. I
yeah,
don't do that much anymore. So if it's really, really, really hot, I'm coming in and getting on the treadmill. But that being said, I sweat a lot too. And so, but if I have really depleted, I may put a little bit of uniodized, just some plain kosher salt under my tongue. But that's an extreme.
gotcha.
I find for myself, once I start trying to be a chemist with my own chemistry, I get out of whack. So maybe a little salt once in a while, but that's it. I don't take
Gotcha.
anything else. Yeah.
Very nice. So we got 3 minutes left. I want to
Okay.
respect the time. I love books. I love to read. You have a ton of cookbooks behind you. One, is there any particular cookbook you would recommend? And then two, any other books that you've been reading that you like to recommend or share with me and the audience?
So I don't know. There's so many good cookbooks. I don't know. Yeah, they're all good. I mean, I think there's something in every cookbook. I read cookbooks like books. So
Do you
um,
really?
I do. So any of those, I read everything.
Okay.
I find any topic fascinating. So I'd have to look at my phone to tell you what I'm reading at the moment.
Yeah.
Because I keep like 5 different things going because it kind of depends on my mood that day.
Yeah.
Like sometimes I'm like really into a thriller, but then the next day I'm really into like a memoir. I love a good memoir. Oh, one thing I'm really enjoying right now that might be particularly of interest to your listeners is I'm reading, it's called Thirst
Okay.
by Heather Anderson.
Okay.
And it is her memoir of her she set the record on the Pacific Crest Trail. And she broke the record for men and women. And she goes through kind of why she chose to do it and what personal demons she was sort of going through at the time and why she chose to do it. So did you ever read that book Wild by Cheryl Strayed? They made
I
a
have
movie.
not read that.
Reese Witherspoon. Anyway, so she did it, but she did it kind of in a more like, I'm just going to go out there and do it. Whereas Heather Anderson did it in a record attempt. So it was a little more kind of probably what we'd be more interested in. It's a little more there's a little bit more of kind of the athletic talk in it, which I appreciated. So I'm reading that right now and I really am enjoying it. I don't know her, but I'm really enjoying it.
Very nice. Very nice. All right. Last question here is, what's a final thought that you'd want to share with the audience? We've covered a lot. We've talked about discipline being freedom, emotions following action. If there's a final thought that you'd like to leave, what might that be?
You know, honestly, and if my kids listen to this, they're going to roll their eyes, but this is the truth. I think that if you do nothing else to help your life, exercise. And I mean that sincerely. It doesn't matter what you do. You can jump around for 20 minutes in your living room, get out and walk with a friend. I really think that our world would be completely different if everybody just exercised 20 minutes a day, because it completely changes your chemistry.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I agree.
I know that sounds like a sales pitch for running. It's not. It doesn't matter what kind you do. Just do something.
No, I love it. Yeah, just do something. I love it. Carilyn, thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you so much for responding to my DM. I saw on your Twitter page, you don't respond to DMs. So I was like, oh no. But thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you having me. I really enjoyed it, and it was really nice talking to you.
All right, take care.
Thank you. You too.